The loss of Spain and the expulsion from the beautiful lands of Andalusia has left a permanent scar on Muslims. Today, the Alhambra in Granada gives just a glimpse of how much Islamic rulers and their artists had accomplished there, and so just how deep that loss was. Poetry and novels still lament that legendary paradise. Much Islamic architecture, certainly most of what survives today, was built under state patronage. Even the richest courtier usually needed the permission of the Sultan or the authorities before he could build. The rulers of Granada itself were the Nasirids. The courtyards and beautiful tilework of the Alhambra palace disguised the fact that these Muslim rulers were generally mediocre and rather decadent. Mathematics and astronomy flourished, but so did murder and intrigue. They were easy game for their Catholic conquerors. But as Muslim rule collapsed in the West, it was reinvigorated in the East. When the Muslims were finally expelled, many of them found their way to Constantinople or Istanbul, where re-energized Islam was making its mark.
Constantinople was a dying and decaying city. The new Muslim rulers brought in people from different cultures and religions, including Jews and Christians, and repopulated it. And Istanbul became the thriving and bustling city it is today.
The bazaar is the embodiment of the hustle and the prosperity of today's Istanbul. But its origins go directly back to that period of reinvigoration when the Ottomans arrived. Mehmet himself founded the bazaar.
He ordered people from several regions of the empire to come and settle in Istanbul. This was an obligation. People from all over the empire were forcibly settled in Istanbul. But they were not selected randomly. They were usually masters in a certain art, in a certain branch of trade, or in architecture or in art.
Later, it was one of these young craftsmen who became the greatest Ottoman architect. His name was Sinan. He established a distinctively Ottoman style that was to become familiar to everyone. And his inspiration was the Hagia Sophia, originally Christian.
Sinan was inspired by the dome because the dome has been a problem for architects for centuries. But you see, the Ottoman dome is a dome in stone. This is very important because in the earlier centuries, there are brick domes. Brick is much easier to build up.
The dome and pencil-thin minarets were to become the trademark of Sinan. He had been born a Christian and built with the zeal of a convert. In Istanbul, there was the Suleymaniye Mosque complex, Kilij Ali Pasha Mosque, and the Rustam Pasha Mosque. The evidence of Sinan's skills can be found not just in Istanbul, but all over the Ottoman Empire, from the Balkans to Baghdad. He designed 355 building projects, including 81 mosques. Aleppo in Syria has at least 2 mosques attributed to the master. The Khosrofia, named after an Ottoman governor of the province, was the first Ottoman-style mosque to be built in the city. In Damascus, Sinan designed another religious complex known as the Taqiyya. This was intended as a hostel, providing free lodgings and a place to pray for the pilgrims on their way to Mecca.
Rather like the carnival in Rio, the pilgrimage in Damascus was the sort of thing around which the whole year revolved.
Throughout the Ottoman times, the pilgrimage was a huge event, and the prestige of the Ottoman Sultan depended greatly on the success of the pilgrimage, the Hajj. The long processions with thousands of pilgrims, not to mention a small army of merchants, soldiers and other hangers-on, was seen off from Damascus in grand style. It was an emotional business, and many were not going to come back.
The pilgrimage from Damascus to Mecca was incredibly dangerous, because you have to see Damascus as a kind of port, the last civilized place before you got to this vast ocean of sand, which was the desert. And the desert was full of Bedouin tribes who knew damn well that these pilgrims, on the way back especially, were loaded with stuff they bought in Mecca. Sometimes the Bedouins poisoned the wells, filling them with dead animals. Sometimes they just attacked them and slaughtered them. There were instances when the whole pilgrimage, and you have to remember this is something like 20,000 people, were just killed by the Bedouin. And if the pilgrimage came back successfully, then the whole Ottoman world rejoiced, because it meant money in the coffers.
In the Ottoman capital, Istanbul, it was that money in the coffers that enabled the Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent to build what is widely regarded to be one of the finest examples of Ottoman architecture, the Suleymaniye. If much Ottoman architecture was state-sponsored architecture, Sinan was its supreme practitioner. It was here that Sinan perfected his use of domes.
Sinan used these half domes and quarter domes and galleries to support. So when you look at a typical Ottoman mosque, you see it goes up step by step. All these elements go step by step to the dome.
The weight of the main dome forces its supporting walls outwards. By using half and quarter domes, the force is converted into a downward one, which the walls can support. The smaller domes disguise the buttressing which supports the main dome externally. And the thin buttresses allow the dome to be surrounded by windows. Inside, the main dome is supported by 4 slim pillars. The 4 red granite pillars are said to have come from each of the 4 corners of the empire.
He looked at the Hagia Sophia. When it was first built, it had enormous numbers of windows. But of course, as they built more and more buttresses to keep the thing up, they blocked the windows. What Sinan was able to do, probably because he understood that, was to build a series of mosques where the interior during the day was flooded with light. And at night, you had these huge hoops with oil lamps on them, also provided this great sheet of light beyond which the dome loomed and seemed almost to be part of the sky because it wasn't visibly linked to the building beneath.
Suleiman the Magnificent's body is buried under another of Sinan's domes, in a tomb beside the mosque. The pepper pot tomb reflects the cascading shape of the main building. Adjacent to it is the tomb of Suleiman's scheming wife, Roxelana. She had persuaded Suleiman to have his eldest son killed so her own son could inherit the throne. Sinan, the great architect, died in 1588. In contrast to his monumental works, he is buried in a modest tomb in the shadow of the Suleymaniye. Sinan's tomb is just a small part of what makes up the largest religious and social complex ever built under the Ottomans. Surrounding the prayer hall and courtyard is a small town of other buildings which go to make up the Suleymaniye. Sinan built for a ruling religion. His mosques had to be bigger and his minarets higher than any Christian church.
The mosque is surrounded by a number of colleges, a hospital, a public kitchen, a caravanserai, a bathhouse, and these have been placed on the hilly terrain of the historic peninsula in such a way that the dome of the mosque dominates the whole complex, and the whole in turn dominates the hill that overlooks the Golden Horn, is what makes Suleymaniye such an accomplishment.
Further along the peninsula, his seat of government also overlooked the waterway. The hub of empire